My sister's voice cut through the New Year's party like broken glass. "You're already 37 and still unmarried? Must be hard celebrating New Year's all by yourself," she mocked loudly so everyone in the room could hear. A few cousins laughed. Someone coughed awkwardly. My mother kept holding her champagne glass mid-toast, pretending not to notice. I slowly placed my drink on the table and looked at my sister. "You don't need to worry about me," I said calmly. "I've actually been married for quite a while." The room went silent. My mother froze in the middle of her speech. My sister blinked at me, confused, waiting for the punchline she assumed was coming, but there wasn't one. For years, they had treated me like the family failure, the quiet daughter who worked too much, dated too little, and apparently had nothing interesting in her life. What they didn't know was that my silence had never meant loneliness. It meant patience, and tonight, after 5 years of keeping the truth to myself, I had finally decided it was time for my family to learn who I had really married. I've always been the quiet one in my family. Not weak, just quiet. In our house, the loudest person usually won the argument. And that person was almost always my younger sister, Layla. She had a talent for turning every gathering into a performance, every conversation into a spotlight. I, on the other hand, preferred watching people rather than competing with them. Somehow that difference slowly turned into a label. The boring sister, the work-obsessed one, the one who would probably end up alone. It started as jokes when we were younger, but over the years those jokes hardened into assumptions. Every holiday dinner came with the same questions. Are you seeing anyone yet? Don't you want a family? Aren't you worried about your age? My mother never meant to be cruel, but she measured success in very simple ways. Marriage, children, and appearances. Lila checked every box early. She married young, posted smiling photos online, and made sure everyone knew it. Meanwhile, I built something quieter. A demanding career, a private life, a relationship no one in my family ever bothered to ask about seriously. They assumed that if they didn't see a ring, there was no story. So they stopped looking. What they never realized was that the most important part of my life had been unfolding quietly for years right under their noses. And the reason I kept it secret was the same reason tonight's silence felt so satisfying. The silence after my words lasted only a few seconds before the room filled with soft laughter. Lila tilted her head, smiling the way she always did when she thought someone was bluffing. "Oh, really?" she said lightly, swirling the champagne in her glass. "And where's this mysterious husband of yours? Invisible?" A few relatives chuckled again. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I watched the small reactions around the table, the raised eyebrows, the curious looks, the quiet amusement. None of them believed me. That wasn't new. For years, family gatherings had followed the same quiet pattern. Someone would ask about Lila's life, her house renovations, her vacations, her anniversary trips. Everyone leaned in, interested. When it came to me, the questions were shorter, polite, careless. "Still working those long hours? You really should get out more. You know, time goes by fast." Sometimes Lila would lean closer to the others and say, things just loud enough for me to hear. "She's married to her job." Or worse, with a soft laugh. "Some people just aren't relationship types." The room would fill with gentle, dismissive smiles, as if they were discussing an unusual habit rather than a person sitting 3 feet away. I never argued, never corrected them. I simply let them believe whatever made them comfortable. Because the truth, like most quiet things, was patient. And patience has a way of making the right moment unmistakable. For a moment, I considered letting the joke pass like I always had. It would have been easy. Smile politely, change the subject, let the night move on. That had been my role in the family for years. The quiet one who absorbed the comments and kept the peace. But something about Lila's expression stopped me. It wasn't just teasing anymore. It was certainty. The kind that comes from believing someone else's life is smaller than yours. My mother finally lowered her glass. "Married?" she asked slowly, studying my face as if searching for the punchline. I met her eyes calmly. "Yes." The room grew still again. This time not from laughter, but confusion. Lila leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "Come on," she said with a small smirk. "You expect us to believe you secretly got married and never told anyone?" I held her gaze for a few seconds. Then I reached into my coat pocket. Not dramatically, not with anger, just quietly. When I placed the small leather wallet on the table and slid a photograph out, several people leaned forward instinctively. It was a simple picture, taken 5 years earlier. 2 people standing in front of a courthouse. Me, and the man my entire family knew very well. just not in the way they were about to realize. 5 years earlier, I had made a decision that surprised even me. Not because I rushed into it, but because I planned it carefully. The man in the photograph wasn't a stranger to my family. In fact, they had known him for years. Daniel had started as a quiet consultant at the firm where I worked, a sharp legal strategist who specialized in corporate negotiations. Most people underestimated him the same way they underestimated me because he spoke softly and listened more than he talked. We became friends first. Late meetings turned into quiet dinners, shared ideas, and long conversations about patience, reputation, and timing. Daniel used to say that the smartest move in any negotiation was knowing when not to reveal your position. Eventually, our partnership became something deeper. When we married at the courthouse, we agreed on one simple rule. We would keep our private life separate from the noise of my family until the moment felt right, not out of secrecy, out of clarity. During those years, Daniel quietly built something impressive, expanding his legal practice, advising companies, and eventually becoming a partner in one of the city's most respected firms. Meanwhile, my family continued believing the same small story about me, the lonely daughter, the unmarried sister. Tonight wasn't revenge born from anger. It was simply the moment when silence had finally done its work. I slid the photograph across the table without saying a word. At first, only my mother leaned closer to see it. Her eyes narrowed slightly, then widened as recognition settled in. The color slowly drained from her face. "Wait," she whispered. Lila reached over impatiently and picked up the picture. For a moment, she stared at it without reacting. Then her confident smile faltered. That's Daniel," she said quietly. Of course it was. Daniel had attended a few family events years ago, always introduced simply as a colleague, who sometimes helped me with legal matters. My family barely paid attention to him back then. To them, he had just been another quiet professional standing beside the boring sister. But now they were looking closer, at the courthouse steps in the photo, at the date printed in the corner, at the simple wedding bands on our hands. 5 years. The room filled with a strange, careful silence. My mother slowly set her glass down on the table. "You've been married this whole time?" she asked. "Yes," I replied calmly. Lila placed the photograph back down as if it had suddenly become fragile. No one laughed this time, and for the first time in years, no one seemed quite sure what to say to me. The room didn't explode into drama the way people imagine moments like this do. Instead, the energy shifted quietly. My aunt cleared her throat. One of my cousins looked down at his phone, pretending sudden interest in the screen. Conversations that had been loud a few minutes earlier softened into careful whispers. My mother kept staring at the photograph, as if the last 5 years had just rearranged themselves in her mind. "You never told us," she said slowly. "You never asked," I replied. It wasn't said with anger, just truth. Across the table, Lila's confidence had disappeared. She looked between me and the photo again, trying to rebuild the version of the story she had believed for so long. For years, my silence had helped define my reputation in this family. Quiet meant weak, private meant lonely, focused meant unsuccessful in the ways that mattered to them. But now the same silence looked different. Strategic, intentional. The unmarried sister they joked about had quietly built a stable marriage, a career, and a life that didn't depend on their approval. No arguments were needed. No dramatic speech. Because sometimes the most powerful shift in a room happens when people suddenly realize how completely they misunderstood someone. And once that realization arrives, there's no way to pretend it never happened. Later that night, when the countdown finally began, the room sounded different. Not quieter exactly, just more careful. People spoke to me with a new tone, as if they were suddenly aware there were whole chapters of my life they had never bothered to read. My mother asked a few hesitant questions about Daniel, about when we met, about where he was tonight. I answered simply. He was working late, as usual. Lila barely said anything for the rest of the evening. Once or twice I caught her studying me, as though she were seeing me for the first time. Not as the older sister she liked to tease, but as someone whose life she had completely misjudged. And strangely, I didn't feel triumphant, just calm. For years, I had quietly built a life that didn't rely on applause from this room. Tonight hadn't changed my marriage, my work, or the quiet rhythm Daniel and I shared. It had only corrected a misunderstanding. When midnight arrived, everyone raised their glasses. This time, no one joked about me being alone. I lifted my glass, feeling a quiet sense of peace settle in my chest. Because the best revenge isn't proving people wrong. It's living so well that one day they finally realized they were.